The deputy's hand was on my front door at 9:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October, 3 feet of fresh Rocky Mountain snow on my porch railing. My 15-year-old son Nico on the staircase behind me in his pajamas. The deputy said,
"Sir, per the Alpine Ridge Reserve HOA covenant, you are required to surrender a copy of your front door key for the master registry."
Mrs. Caldwell has the form right here.
I am going to ask you to comply.
The blonde woman beside him smiled at her phone. Behind me, my son did not move. I looked at the deputy. I looked at the woman. I looked at the door I had built with my late wife in 2008. I said,
"Officer, with respect, I am going to need the name of your sergeant, and by the end of this week, I am going to need a different kind of lock."
I came to the mountain house in Granby permanently in March of 2023, 11 months after my wife Anya died, with my son Nico, a 7-year-old border collie named Cherry, and 23 years of receipts from Apple Inc. that I no longer needed anyone to authenticate. The mountain house sits at 8,234 feet on the south face of a ridge that overlooks the upper Colorado River, where it loops out of Granby and starts the long crawl down to Hot Sulphur Springs. Aspen, fir, and ponderosa pine, in approximately that order, descend the slope from the deck to the river. A red-tailed hawk pair has been nesting in the dead spruce at the corner of the lot for 9 summers. I am Chris DeMarco, 53 years old, born in New Haven, Connecticut, raised by a single mother who taught high school math for 41 years and could solve a Rubik's Cube faster than I could put my shoes on. I went to MIT on her dime and a tuition waiver, did a master's in cryptography, and joined Apple in Cupertino in 1999. 23 years there, the last 8 on the Secure Enclave hardware team. If you have unlocked an iPhone with your face since 2017, my fingerprints are on the silicon that decided whether your face was you. I designed sections of the matching algorithm. I did not design the camera. The camera was Manolo Vera's, and Manolo Vera is a better engineer than I have ever been. I retired in late 2022 because Anya needed me at home. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is a disease that takes a person apart muscle by muscle while leaving the brain intact, so that the person who you love can watch herself dissolve. Anya was diagnosed in March 2021. She died in April 2022, 4 days after our 22nd anniversary, in our bedroom in Cupertino, with my hand on her wrist and our son asleep on the floor at the foot of the bed. We had loved this mountain house for 16 summers. Anya had asked, 2 weeks before she died, that I take Nico there to live. So I did. Anya had been the senior product designer at a children's furniture company in Palo Alto. She had been born in St. Petersburg and brought to Brooklyn at 9. She had a laugh I could pick out of any crowded restaurant on either coast. She had taught Nico how to whittle a fishing lure on this porch the summer he was 9. The lure is still in the kitchen drawer next to the silverware, painted brown and white the way she had taught him to paint a sculpin. I do not move it. I open the drawer and I see it and I close the drawer. Nico opens the drawer and he sees it and he closes the drawer. Neither of us says anything. The mountain house is inside a planned community called Alpine Ridge Reserve. 240 homes scattered over 400 acres of formerly Forest Service land, developed beginning in 1996 by a man named Greg Caldwell, who is 58 years old, owns a real estate firm in Granby, drives a Range Rover, and is married to the woman who, by the time we moved up here in 2023, had been president of the Alpine Ridge Reserve HOA board for 4 years. Brenda Caldwell, 51, blonde down to her elbows, white Range Rover identical to her husband's, the kind of laugh you can hear across 2 switchbacks in still air, the kind of smile that arrived on her face 6 steps before she did. I met her the second day after we moved in. She came up our driveway in white slacks and a turquoise quilted vest, carrying a casserole dish wrapped in foil and a leather binder that she would, over the course of the next 8 minutes, refer to 4 separate times as the Master Key Registry Program. Hi, Mr. DeMarco. Welcome to Alpine Ridge. We have a covenant we ask all new residents to comply with. A copy of your front door key, registered with the HOA office, so we can access your home in an emergency. We'll need a copy by Friday. I said, Mrs. Caldwell, I am going to need to read the covenant first. Could I have a copy of the actual section? Her smile did not waver. Section 7.2.f. I'll email it, or you can come down to the lodge. She did not email it. I went down to the lodge the next morning. The receptionist, A woman named Trina, 26, kind face, who would later become one of the witnesses I would protect with my own attorney, printed me a copy. Section 7.2.f did not require me to surrender a key. Section 7.2.f said that residents may, at their discretion, register a copy of their primary access keys with the HOA office for emergency access purposes. The word may was the entire load-bearing wall of the regulation. I drove back home. I did not give Brenda Caldwell a key on Friday. By the next Tuesday, she had filed an architectural complaint against me. By the following Tuesday, she had called the Grand County Sheriff's Office. By the third Tuesday, the deputy was standing on my porch. I had spent 23 years at Apple, writing the kind of documentation other engineers actually read. So when the architectural complaint arrived in my mailbox 3 days after my first refusal to give Brenda a key, I sat at my kitchen table in the morning sunlight that comes through our south-facing window at 9,100-foot altitude in October, and I drafted my response with the same care I would have used on a secure enclave threat model. The complaint, signed by Brenda Caldwell on Alpine Ridge Reserve HOA letterhead, cited me for non-compliance with Section 7.2.f of the Master Access Protocol and proposed a fine of $150, compounding at $25 per day. My response, cited and indexed and 3 pages long, walked Brenda through the actual text of Section 7.2f. The actual text of Colorado Revised Statute 38-33.3-209.5, governing HOA enforcement powers under the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, and the actual text of the Colorado HOA Reform Act of 2022, which had become law 9 months earlier and which expressly prohibited an HOA from imposing fines for non-compliance with any covenant that contained the word may. The word may, in the language of the legislature, did not impose a duty. I sent the response, certified mail, return receipt requested. Brenda Caldwell signed for it on October 6th. The fines kept accruing on her side of the ledger. I added the receipt to the file I had started that morning in a manila folder labeled Caldwell in pencil, because I was no longer at Apple, and a Sharpie felt like the kind of thing the firm would have made me explain to legal. Nico walked past the table on his way out to the garage with his mountain bike helmet on the morning after the third complaint arrived. He stopped. He looked at the folder. He looked at me. He said, "Dad, is this going to be a thing?" I said, "Nico, this is going to be a thing." He thought about it for a long minute. He is 15, and like his mother, he asks the question he actually wants the answer to. He said, "Dad, why does she want a copy of our key so badly?" I had been turning that question over in my mind for 3 days. The honest answer was that I did not know yet. The other honest answer was that nobody legitimate in any community, anywhere in the country, in any year of any decade, asks for a copy of a stranger's house key without an actual emergency in progress. The third honest answer, the one I did not say out loud to my 15-year-old son, was that any woman who has built a leather binder to track other people's house keys has, by definition, used those keys. I said, "I don't know yet. I am going to find out." He nodded. He went out to the garage. I heard the door open. Across the next 10 days, the complaints continued. The architectural complaints turned into noise complaints, which turned into an unfriendly landscaping complaint, when I planted 3 native ponderosa saplings on the slope below the deck without filing for committee approval. The Colorado HOA Reform Act of 2022 also covered native species, which is to say, you cannot fine somebody for planting a tree that grew there before the developer paved the road. I responded to each one in writing. I cited the statute on each one in writing. I never raised my voice on the phone because I never had a phone call. I never spoke to her in person because I did not see her in person. The mountain in October is a place where neighbors do not see each other because the days are short and the wood stoves are lit and you are inside by 4:30. I documented the temperature on every complaint date because at altitude the temperature matters, and a record that is going to be used in a courtroom benefits from temperature. On the third Tuesday in October, the Grand County Sheriff's Office sent a deputy up the mountain. I did not give the deputy a key. I asked the deputy, very politely, 3 questions, in order, with the body cam still rolling. The first question was, "Deputy, can you cite for me the specific Colorado state statute that authorizes a peace officer to compel surrender of personal property to a private homeowners association on the basis of a contested civil covenant. The deputy could not. The second question was, "Deputy, can you cite for me the section of the Alpine Ridge Reserve HOA covenants that requires me, as opposed to permits me, to register a copy of my house key with Mrs. Caldwell?" The deputy could not. The third question was, "Deputy, did anyone at the Grand County Sheriff's Office, prior to dispatching you this morning, conduct any review of the Colorado HOA Reform Act of 2022 as it applies to this covenant?" The deputy did not answer. Brenda Caldwell stepped forward and said, "Mr. DeMarco, you are being deliberately difficult. The deputy has explained the regulation. We have other residents to visit today. The form is right here. We need a key." I looked at Deputy Halverson. I said, "Deputy, I am going to make a request, and I would like to make it in front of the body cam. I am formally requesting a written incident report from this visit, including a statement of the legal basis on which you came to my door. I will be making a Colorado Open Records Act request for the body cam footage by the end of business today. I am declining to surrender any personal property at this time. I am asking you to leave my porch." The deputy hesitated. He looked at Brenda. He looked back at me. He said, "Sir, with respect, I would suggest you cooperate. Mrs. Caldwell is a respected community member. If you push back on the HOA, you are going to make your life up here a lot harder." That sentence is the one I had Nico transcribe from the body cam that evening at the kitchen table. He typed it up on a yellow legal pad I had bought in town for exactly this purpose, in his careful adolescent handwriting, with the timestamp from the footage in the margin. He left the pad on the kitchen table when he went to bed. The next morning he had written one additional sentence at the bottom of the page, in a hand even more careful than the deputy's quote. Mom would have said, "Build the cleanest stack you can." I have not removed that page from the legal pad. I keep the pad in my office, on the shelf above the second edition Knuth that Anya gave me for my 40th birthday, with a post-it note inside the cover that said, "Go find your problem, Chris." The legal pad sits next to the Knuth. When Nico gets older, the legal pad goes to him. I drove down the mountain that Wednesday morning, 3 days after the deputy's visit, to a hardware store in Tabernash called High Country Lock and Key. The owner is a man named Dennis Knudsen, 61, Norwegian-American, who has been installing locks on mountain houses in Grand County since 1982. I had met Dennis once at the Granby Farmers Market 2 summers earlier, when Anya was still alive, and we had bought a jar of his wife's honey. Dennis remembered me. Dennis remembered Anya. Dennis was the kind of small-town locksmith who can fit you with a deadbolt in 12 minutes flat, and who, more importantly to my situation, had been quietly furious for 3 years at the operation Brenda Caldwell was running at the Alpine Ridge Reserve Community Lodge. "Mr. DeMarco, I would not normally say this about a customer of mine, but she has been running a master key program at that lodge that nobody legitimate in this trade would tolerate. I personally know 7 of my customers up there who said no to the key registry, and 3 of them got broken into within 2 months. I asked him what he knew. He told me what he knew. We sat in the front office of High Country Lock and Key for an hour and a half. By the time I left, I had a list of 7 addresses, a parts order for 2 August Wi-Fi smart deadbolts, and 1 Lockley Vision biometric deadbolt with a front-facing camera and Wi-Fi notifications, and Dennis Knudsen's home phone number written on the back of his business card with the words, "Call anytime, Chris," underneath. When I got home, Nico was on the couch watching a YouTube video about how Face ID works. He had figured out, on his own, in the 2 days since the deputy left our porch, what his father was about to do. He looked up. He said, "Dad, are we doing biometric?" I said, "Yeah, buddy, we're doing biometric." He said, "Cool." I installed the Lockley Vision biometric deadbolt myself on Saturday morning. It took me 41 minutes. Nico helped with the wiring. The face recognition enrollment took 6 seconds for each of us. The mountain house, for the first time in the 17 years we had owned it, no longer accepted any physical key on its front door. I also did 3 smaller things that Saturday afternoon. I installed a Reolink doorbell camera above the porch light. I installed 2 outdoor PoE cameras at the south and east corners of the eave, both wired to a small NAS in the basement that I had set up with an air-gapped backup to a second drive in a Pelican case I kept in the woodshed. I configured the Lockly Vision to send a silent push notification to my phone every time it captured a face that the system did not recognize. By the end of the afternoon, the mountain house had more biometric authentication on its front porch than the back parking lot at Apple Park in 2018. Nico, watching me solder the doorbell wiring, said, "Dad, this is the kind of thing Mom would have wanted to be on the team for." I said, "Nico, your mother would have led the team." The first time the system caught Brenda Caldwell on the porch, it was 4:47 a.m. on a Thursday in early November. She came up the driveway in her white Range Rover with the headlights off. She got out in a parka and a watch cap, with a small zippered case in her gloved right hand. She walked to my front door. She unzipped the case. She tried, in sequence, 4 different keys. The Lockly Vision deadbolt is a touchscreen-only deadbolt that does not have a physical keyway visible on the exterior. There is a hidden override slot for a brass key, but the slot is concealed behind a sliding magnetic panel that is invisible to anybody who has not been told it exists. Brenda Caldwell did not know it existed. She stood at the door for 9 minutes. She tried the doorknob. She tried each of her 4 keys against the smooth aluminum surface of the deadbolt, as though one of them might fit a lock that was not there. She looked at the door. She looked at the porch. She looked at the porch light, which by then had taken 146 photographs of her face. She went back to the Range Rover. She drove away. The next morning, at 7:14 a.m., 3 minutes after sunrise, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. A woman named Ksenia Petrova stood on my porch in a parka and a wool scarf. She was 68, Russian-born, retired pediatric oncologist, lived 4 houses down on the lower switchback. Her husband Yuri had died of a heart attack on his own porch in 2019. She lived alone now. She said, "Mr. DeMarco, I am sorry to come without invitation. I have heard from Trina at the office that you said no to the keys. I have been waiting 2 years for somebody to say no to the keys." I invited her in. I made her coffee. Nico brought down a plate of cookies his grandmother had sent from New Haven. Mrs. Petrova told me, in careful English with the rolling Russian R, what had been happening to her since 2022. In 2022, she had given Brenda Caldwell a copy of her front door key for the master registry. Across the following 16 months, 3 things had happened. The first was that a small, enameled box from her mother, silver and lapis, a thing she had carried out of Leningrad in 1979, had disappeared from her bedroom dresser. The second was that a 1962 wedding ring from her late mother-in-law, kept in a velvet pouch in her closet, had disappeared from the velvet pouch. The third was that on 3 separate occasions she had returned from a doctor's appointment in Granby to find the lamp in her front room moved by precisely 6 inches to the left, every time. She had not called the police. She was, she said, frightened. Frightened of the woman in the white Range Rover. Frightened of being labeled paranoid by the small police force in a small mountain town. Frightened of being labeled, in her exact words, the old foreign lady who is making up stories. She showed me a photograph of the enameled box on her phone. She showed me a photograph of the wedding ring. She showed me 3 time-stamped photographs of the lamp in her front room. I asked her if she would be willing to file an official report. She looked at me a long moment. She said, "Mr. DeMarco, if you will be a witness, if you will sit beside me at the sheriff's office, if you will not let them dismiss me, then I will file." I said, "Mrs. Petrova, I will be a witness. I will sit beside you at the sheriff's office. I will not let them dismiss you, and I would like, if you will allow me, to introduce you to my old colleague Manolo, who designed the camera that took the picture of Mrs. Caldwell on my porch at 4:47 a.m. yesterday." She smiled for the first time since she had walked in. She said, "Mr. DeMarco, your wife was a lucky woman." I said, "Mrs. Petrova, I was the lucky one." By the end of that week, 3 other Alpine Ridge Reserve homeowners had appeared at my door. A retired school teacher named Janet Yates, whose grandfather's pocket watch had disappeared in 2022. A divorced father named Patrick O'Neill, whose late mother's pearl earrings had gone missing in 2023. A young couple named the Brennans, whose vintage stereo amplifier had vanished from their basement in July 2024. Each of them had given Brenda Caldwell a copy of their front door key. Each of them, in the months that followed, had quietly lost something. None of them had filed a report. I started a spreadsheet. By the second Saturday of November, I had 11 names on it. The 4:47 a.m. footage from my Lockley Vision deadbolt was the kind of evidence I would have used as a textbook example at Apple's internal security training conference if I had still been employed there. 64 frames per second of high-resolution facial capture, stereoscopic depth mapping, color corrected for porch light, a timestamp inside the secure enclave that could not be modified after the fact because the secure enclave is, by hardware design, write once for log data. I had Brenda Caldwell on my porch at 4:47 a.m. with 4 keys in her hand and a 16-second pattern of attempted entry that was, by the definition of Colorado Revised Statute 184202, attempted second-degree burglary of a dwelling. I did not call the sheriff yet. I did, that Monday morning, call Manolo Vera in Cupertino. Manolo had retired in March of 2024. He still consulted. He listened to me for 38 minutes without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "Chris, I am going to introduce you to the senior special agent at the Denver field office of the FBI, who handled the Cupertino industrial espionage cases. She will take this call by Wednesday." The FBI agent's name was Anika Stoll. She had 18 years in the bureau. She had handled the corporate espionage cases at Apple in 2017 and 2019, which is how Manolo knew her. She listened to my evidence for 52 minutes on a Wednesday afternoon call. At the end, she said, "Mr. DeMarco, the 47-year-old federal mail fraud statute applies here. So does 18 U.S.C. 1349. So does the Federal Travel Act. I am not going to lead the investigation. I am going to refer you to the Grand County District Attorney for the state charges, and I am going to make one phone call on your behalf to a friend of mine who is the Assistant DA in Hot Sulphur Springs. Her name is Renata Cortez. She is going to expect your call." Renata Cortez took my call the next morning. She was 44, a graduate of CU Boulder Law School, had been an ADA in Grand County for 9 years. She read me the entire file I had emailed her overnight in 41 minutes. At the end, she said one sentence, "Mr. DeMarco, I am going to bring this to the grand jury within 6 weeks." She also asked me, gently, whether I had told Mrs. Petrova about the 4:47 a.m. footage. I said I had not. She asked whether she could meet with Mrs. Petrova at my home. I said yes. By the end of November, the spreadsheet had grown. 23 Alpine Ridge Reserve homeowners had quietly told either Dennis the locksmith or me about an item that had disappeared from a closed home in the past 48 months. 8 of them were willing to come to a meeting. 5 of them were willing to file sworn statements. 3 of them, Mrs. Petrova, Janet Yates, and Patrick O'Neill, were willing to testify. ADA Cortez also informed me, in late November, of one additional piece of information that her investigators had developed independently. Brenda Caldwell's husband, Greg, the original developer of Alpine Ridge Reserve, had been quietly moving HOA reserve fund money through a personal LLC for 11 years. Total documented diversions, as of November 27th, $1.4 million. The deputy who had stood on my porch on October 22nd, Mason Halverson, was married, as it turned out, to Brenda Caldwell's HOA secretary, a woman named Lila Halverson. ADA Cortez was looking at whether Deputy Halverson had any visibility into the master key registry that he had not disclosed to his supervisor. I closed my laptop on the night of November 30th. I went outside to the deck. The Milky Way is sharper at 8,234 feet in late November than it is anywhere on the western seaboard. Nico came out with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, the way he had brought hot chocolate to his mother on the deck for 13 Decembers. He handed me a mug. He sat down beside me. He said, "Dad, how are we going to do this?" I said, "Nico, we are going to invite her over." The invitation went out by certified mail on December 2nd from the Granby Post Office, in a cream envelope I had hand-addressed to Brenda P. Caldwell, 1847 Eagle Ridge Drive, Granby, Colorado, 80446. Inside the envelope was a single piece of letterhead I had printed at home that morning. Mrs. Caldwell. The DeMarco family is hosting an open community gathering at our home, 22 Aspen Bluff Lane, on Saturday, December 14th, from 6 to 9 p.m. The purpose of the gathering is to discuss recent security concerns at Alpine Ridge Reserve and to demonstrate a new approach to home access that may be of interest to the community. We would be honored if you would attend. Refreshments will be provided. Please RSVP to confirm your presence. Sincerely, Chris and Nico DeMarco. It was a real invitation. It was also, in the language ADA Cortez and I had drafted together that Sunday afternoon at her office in Hot Sulphur Springs, a confirmed evidentiary pretext for what was going to happen on December 13th. December 13th was a Friday. December 13th was the day my family had announced, 2 weeks earlier on the Alpine Ridge Reserve Neighborhood Facebook page, that we were leaving for a 4-day ski trip at Winter Park. We had purchased visible lift tickets that we had not used. We had packed the car visibly on Wednesday. We had parked the car at a buddy's cabin in Tabernash on Thursday morning. We had walked back to the mountain house through the backwoods in snowshoes at 5:14 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. The house was dark from the road, from Thursday at sunset onward. The motion detector lights on the porch had been disabled by hand. The Lockley Vision deadbolt was set to the silent burglar alert mode that I had personally specified to the Lockley engineering team during a beta consultation in 2021. A DA Cortez was in a Suburban parked at the bottom of the switchback. FBI Senior Special Agent Annika Stoll was in the passenger seat. 2 FBI field agents were in a second sedan, one switchback up. Sergeant Diane Voorhees of the Grand County Sheriff's Office, the supervisor who had reviewed Deputy Halverson's October 22nd visit and had filed a separate internal affairs concern about it, was in a marked cruiser at the top of the road. Dennis Knudsen was at his shop in Tabernash with his cell phone on and a thermos of coffee. Nico and I were in the master bedroom of the mountain house, in the dark, in down jackets, with 2 laptops, an iPhone, and a quietly humming server rack I had brought up from Cupertino that had the entire Lockley Vision live event stream pointed at it. Across the previous 2 weeks, I had also set up, with Dennis Knudsen's help, and with the written consent of the 3 homeowners whose homes had been most recently targeted, identical Lockley Vision deadbolts at the front doors of Mrs. Petrova's house, Janet Yates's house, and Patrick O'Neill's house. Each of those 3 deadbolts was also set to silent burglar alert mode. Each was networked into the same server rack in my master bedroom. If Brenda Caldwell came to any of the 4 addresses in the next 72 hours with a key in her hand, the system would do exactly what its hardware had been designed to do at Apple in 2016. It would log her face, it would record the timestamp, it would refuse her entry, and it would send a single push notification to 4 phones: mine, ADA Cortez's, Special Agent Stoll's, and Sergeant Voorhees's, within 400 milliseconds. Nico, at 9:47 p.m. on December 12th, sitting in the dark of his mother's old bedroom in a down jacket, looked over at me. He whispered, "Dad, Mom would be so excited right now." I whispered back, "Nico, your mother would be losing her mind." He smiled in the dark. Outside, the snow started. The first push notification came at 12:18 a.m. on December 13th. 6 hours and 4 minutes after Nico and I had snowshoed back into the house through the backwoods. ADA Cortez's voice came over the encrypted radio Special Agent Stoll had wired into the master bedroom. "DeMarco, confirm motion on the porch. Confirm visual." I confirmed visual on the laptop screen. The Lockley Vision camera on my front door had captured Brenda Caldwell in a black down parka and a wool ski mask pulled up over her hair like a hat, walking up my driveway in fresh snow, alone, holding the same zippered key case I had seen at 4:47 a.m. on November 7th. She tried the same 4 keys against the touchscreen deadbolt. None worked. She stood at the door for 2 minutes. She slid her gloved hand along the seam between the deadbolt and the door frame, looking for the override slot. She did not find it. The override slot is behind a magnetic panel that requires a specific orientation of a magnet that does not exist outside of 3 engineers' desk drawers at Apple. I had one of those 3 magnets in the inside pocket of my down jacket as I watched her. She stepped back from the door. She went around to the side of the house. The side yard camera picked her up at 12:24:11 a.m. She tried the side door. The side door also had a Lockley Vision deadbolt. She tried the basement door at the back. The basement door also had a Lockley Vision deadbolt. She came back to the front porch at 12:31 and 8 seconds a.m. She lifted her phone to her ear. She made a call. 12 minutes later, a second vehicle came up the switchback. A 2019 Chevy Silverado with the headlights off. A man in a dark Carhartt jacket got out with a Milwaukee cordless drill and a leather tool bag. I did not recognize the man. ADA Cortez did. She came over the radio at 12:43:22. "DeMarco, the man with the drill is Travis Caldwell. Brenda Caldwell's brother-in-law. 2 prior arrests in Wyoming, 2018 and 2021. Burglary in the first degree, second degree, both pled down. We are go on the warrant the moment he touches the door with the drill, I confirmed. At 12:46 and 9 seconds a.m., Travis Caldwell, brother-in-law of the president of the Alpine Ridge Reserve HOA, put the tip of a 1/4-inch carbide drill bit against the brushed aluminum face of the Lockley Vision deadbolt on the front door of the mountain house Anya and I had bought in 2008. At 12:46:10 a.m., FBI Senior Special Agent Annika Stoll, accompanied by 2 field agents, ADA Renata Cortez and Sergeant Diane Voorhees of the Grand County Sheriff's Office, came out of the tree line at the south side of my property with their tactical lights on and their voices in their command voices. FBI, federal agents, drop the drill, on the ground, now. Travis Caldwell dropped the drill. Brenda Caldwell, behind him, did not drop her phone fast enough. She tried to put it in her parka pocket. Special Agent Stoll, who has 18 years of experience disarming people without raising her voice, gently extended her right hand. Ma'am, the phone. Slowly. Brenda gave her the phone. Sergeant Voorhees cuffed Travis Caldwell on the porch at 12:46:48 a.m. Special Agent Stoll cuffed Brenda Caldwell beside him at 12:47:09 a.m. Stoll Mirandized them both on the porch of my mountain house, in front of a Lockley Vision camera that had quietly recorded everything in 4K, with a timestamp inside the secure enclave that no court of law would ever ask anyone to question. Behind them, in 3 other homes on the mountain, Mrs. Petrova's, Janet Yates's, and Patrick O'Neill's, there had been no notifications. Brenda had only come to mine, the one she had not been able to get into for 2 months, the one whose owner, on a community Facebook page, had announced an absence. She had come to fish me out alone, in a ski mask, with a man with 2 priors and a drill. I came out of the master bedroom in my down jacket at 12:51 a.m. Nico stayed inside, the way ADA Cortez had asked him to stay inside. I walked across the porch to the front door. I did not look at Brenda Caldwell. I did not look at Travis Caldwell. I looked at the brushed aluminum face of the Lockley Vision deadbolt, which still had a small white scuff mark from the drill bit. The scuff would polish out by Sunday. The deadbolt would still work. The same could not be said of the woman in the ski mask. Greg Caldwell, the real estate developer who had created Alpine Ridge Reserve in 1996 and had been married to Brenda Caldwell for 26 years, was arrested at 3:14 a.m. that same Friday morning at the Denver International Airport in the security line for a 6 a.m. flight to Cabo San Lucas, with a black Toomey suitcase containing $148,000 in U.S. cash, a Banco multi-bank check made out to bearer for an additional $412,000, and a printout from his personal email, sent at 12:34 a.m. that night, 12 minutes after his wife's first failed key attempt at my front door, confirming a Mexican real estate purchase scheduled to close at noon Monday. By breakfast on Friday morning, the Alpine Ridge Reserve community Facebook page, normally a sleepy feed of contractor recommendations and lost dog notices, was on fire. Trina from the lodge had quietly posted a single sentence at 6:12 a.m. The DeMarco family is fine. The president of the HOA was arrested at their home at midnight. The comments on Trina's post crossed 200 by 9 a.m. Sergeant Voorhees of the Grand County Sheriff's Office held a brief media availability at the Sheriff's Office in Hot Sulphur Springs at 11 a.m. that Friday morning. She named Brenda Caldwell, Travis Caldwell, and Greg Caldwell. She named the charges. She did not name Deputy Mason Halverson, but she announced that the Grand County Sheriff's Office had opened an internal affairs investigation into the conduct of one deputy on a separate October visit, and that the deputy was on paid administrative leave pending the outcome. The Sky High News sent a reporter to my front porch at noon. I gave the reporter 11 minutes. I gave her Mrs. Petrova's enameled box, photographed in evidence at the sheriff's office, and the wedding ring, which had also been recovered in evidence. Both items had been found in a leather binder labeled Master Registry on the floor of Brenda Caldwell's master closet at 6:14 a.m. that morning, during the execution of a search warrant. The story ran on the front page of the Sky High News on Saturday morning. The headline said, "Apple engineer outsmarts HOA president. The photograph was of the brushed aluminum face of the Lockley Vision deadbolt, with the small drill scuff visible against the morning light. The community lodge at Alpine Ridge Reserve, on a Tuesday night in mid-December, with snow falling on the cedar shingles, smelled like fresh pine garland, and the kind of coffee that has been sitting on a warmer since 6 p.m. I walked in at 3 minutes after 7. Nico walked beside me in a school sport coat his mother had bought him in 2021. There were 178 residents in the lodge. The capacity, on a Forest Service permit, was 190. There were folding chairs along 3 walls. The wood stove in the corner was lit. Trina from the lodge was at the front, in a charcoal sweater, holding a printed agenda and the gavel a previous HOA president had bought at a hardware store in 2008. Mrs. Petrova sat in the front row in a navy dress, with her daughter, who had flown in from Boston that afternoon, beside her. Janet Yates sat in the front row in her teaching cardigan. Patrick O'Neill sat in the front row with a photograph of his late mother in his jacket pocket. Dennis Knudsen sat in the second row in a red flannel shirt. Nico set up the projector. He had built the slide deck over the weekend on a battered MacBook Air his mother had used. The slides were clean. They were not flashy. They were the slides of a 15-year-old who has been taught by his father and his mother and 23 years of Apple keynotes that the best slides have one idea on them, and white space around the idea. I walked to the front. I plugged the Lockley Vision deadbolt into a small wooden frame Dennis Knudsen had built for me on Monday evening. The deadbolt sat upright on the folding table at the front of the room. It looked, in the projector light, exactly like the front door of any house on the mountain. I did not raise my voice. I have not had to in 23 years. My name is Chris DeMarco. I retired from Apple in October of 2022. I designed parts of the system that decides, when you look at your iPhone, whether your face is your face. My wife was Anya Petrov DeMarco. She died of ALS on April 22, 2022. My son Nico is 15 years old. He built the slides you are about to see. The room did not breathe. I did not need them to. Nico clicked the first slide. It said, Alpine Ridge Reserve Master Key Registry, 47 unauthorized entries, 11 stolen items, 1 night in December. The next 41 minutes were a walkthrough. Mrs. Petrova's box, the wedding ring, Janet Yates's grandfather's pocket watch, Patrick O'Neill's mother's pearl earrings, the Brennan family's vintage stereo amplifier, 23 other items I had documented, but for which the owners were not yet ready to come forward in public. The 11-year embezzlement timeline of Greg Caldwell from the HOA Reserve Fund, $1.4 million, slide by slide, transaction by transaction. The fraudulent Snowplow LLC that had billed $298,000 for services never performed. I did not show photographs of Brenda Caldwell. I did not need to. The 45th slide was a single sentence. The Lockley Vision deadbolt on this table is open source. Dennis Knudsen at High Country Lock and Key will install one on any home in Alpine Ridge Reserve for cost plus 0 labor through January 31st. I will personally cover the cost for any household experiencing financial hardship. No key registry will ever be requested of any of you again. The room exhaled. The second to last slide was a photograph Nico had taken on the previous Saturday morning. It was Mrs. Petrova on her own front porch, in a parka, holding the recovered enameled box from her mother in her gloved hands, looking down at it the way a person looks down at a thing they had not expected to ever hold again. The last slide was 3 words. Thank you, neighbors. Trina from the lodge stood up. She did not gavel. She did not need to. She said, in the voice of a 26-year-old woman who has finally been allowed to say what she has wanted to say for 4 years, the Board of Alpine Ridge Reserve hereby dissolves the Master Key Registry Program by emergency resolution, effective immediately. All keys held by the HOA office are to be returned to their owners by Friday. Mrs. Caldwell is hereby formally recalled by emergency vote pending the special election. All in favor. 176 hands went up. 2 did not. One of them was a man in the back named Carl Henning, who had moved to Alpine Ridge in 1998, and who would later, in a private conversation with Trina, apologize and quietly resign from the architectural committee. The other was Lila Halverson, who walked, slowly, on her husband's arm, out of the lodge without looking at anybody. The room rose to its feet. Mrs. Petrova rose first. Janet Yates rose with her. Patrick O'Neill stood up and clapped, once, hard. Dennis Knudsen stood up and put his Stetson on. Nobody else clapped. Nobody else cheered. They just stood. Nico, beside me, did not move. He whispered, "Dad, Mom would be making popcorn." I whispered back, "Nico, your mother would be losing her mind." The grand jury indicted Brenda Caldwell on January 29th on 23 counts. She pleaded out in April to 9, attempted burglary, theft, conspiracy, and 4 counts of theft by deception of HOA funds. She drew 6 years in Colorado State Correctional, with the last 3 suspended on conditions including full restitution to the Alpine Ridge Reserve homeowners she had stolen from, by name, item by item, with interest. Greg Caldwell pleaded in federal court in March to 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 of embezzlement from an interstate financial institution. He drew 38 months in federal custody and was ordered to repay $1.4 million to the Alpine Ridge Reserve HOA Reserve Fund. Travis Caldwell pleaded to attempted second-degree burglary and possession of burglary tools. He drew 4 years in Colorado State Correctional. Deputy Mason Halverson resigned from the Grand County Sheriff's Office on January 8th, ahead of the internal affairs finding, which would have terminated him. He moved with Lila to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where his uncle owned an auto body shop. He sent me a single Christmas card a year later. It said one sentence, "Mr. DeMarco, I should have read the statute. I am sorry." I keep it in the file. The Alpine Ridge Reserve HOA elected Trina Cisneros president on January 14th. Trina was 26. Her first official act, on January 15th, was to walk every household's house key, sealed in its own labeled brown envelope, from the lodge to the front porch of the household that owned it, in her own hands, in person, in 2 days of carrying through the snow. Her second official act was to hire Dennis Knutson as the HOA's permanent locksmith on a clean public contract. Dennis installed 71 Lockley Vision deadbolts in Alpine Ridge Reserve across the next 8 weeks. I covered the cost of 19 of them out of my own pocket. The other 52 households paid cost plus 0 labor, the way I had promised at the lodge. I open-sourced the configuration profile for the system on GitHub on February 14th. The day Anya and I would have celebrated our 24th anniversary, under a permissive license. I named the repository Anya_locks. The README explained, in plain English, how any homeowner with a Lockley Vision deadbolt and a $30 Raspberry Pi could set up the same silent burglar alert network we had used on December 13th. The README also said, in the second-to-last paragraph, that the project was dedicated to a woman named Anya Petrov DeMarco, who had loved her mountain house, and who had also believed that good security is something you give your neighbors, not something you keep from them. Mrs. Petrova came up the driveway on the morning of February 15th in a parka and a pair of bright red snow boots her daughter had sent. She brought a small enameled box on a velvet cloth. The box was not from her mother. The box was new, silver and lapis, made by a craftswoman in Boulder, and inside it was a single key. She said in her careful English, with the rolling Russian R, "Mr. DeMarco, this is the spare key to my house. There are no copies. I am giving it to you. If anything ever happens to me, I would like you to be the person who comes." I took the key. I did not say anything for a long minute. Nico, on the porch behind me, was wiping his nose on his coat sleeve. I said, "Mrs. Petrova, I am honored, and I would like to give you mine." I went inside. I came back with the spare key to our mountain house, on a wooden Apple Store key ring Anya had given me in 2017. I put it in Mrs. Petrova's gloved hand. She closed her fingers over it. She said, "Mr. DeMarco, we are neighbors." We were neighbors. Nico started a small after-school computer club at the Granby Middle School in March, with the help of his English teacher, Mrs. Fitzgerald, who had been Anya's friend on the school's library committee since 2018. The club meets in the school media center on Tuesdays from 3:30 to 5. 11 kids the first week, 16 the second, 22 by April. The kids learn the basics of how a secure enclave works, how a public-private key handshake protects a Wi-Fi network, and how to spot the kind of social engineering question that the kind of person who wants a copy of your house key tends to ask. Nico teaches one section a month. He is 15 years old. He stands at the front of the room and explains hash functions to 12-year-olds in a voice that sounds, to me, more and more like his mother's every Tuesday. If you have ever had an HOA Karen demand the keys to a home that did not belong to her, comment below with your state and what she said she needed them for. Read every one. Subscribe. Next week, a Florida widower, a 1972 Cadillac, and the HOA president who picked the wrong car. She picked the wrong Cadillac.
What Brenda Caldwell did not understand, and what most Paritarians never understand, is that the man for houses down was not a retired Cupertino bureaucrat. He was an engineer who had spent 23 years writing the access control documentations as the engineers read. She thought a K was a K. He thought a K was a math problem. Math problems do not care about HOA letterhead. Math problems do not care about Range Rover or turquoise vest. Math problems run the same way at 4:47 a.m. on a Tuesday as they do at noon on the 4th of July. If an HOA ever asks for a copy of your house key, the first thing you should do is read the actual covenant in full with your reading glasses on. The second thing you should do is say no in writing by certified mail. The third thing you should do is install a deadbolt that does not accept the kind of key any human being can hand to another. The technology has been on the market since 2019. The cost less than a weekend's worth of HOA fines. If this story hit home, drop your own HOA nightmare in the comments, your state, and what she asked for that did not belong to her. Subscribe. Next week, a Florida widower, a 1972 Cadillac, and the HOA president who picked the wrong car. See you on the next one.